Nadhim Zahawi is my next guest. Booked to talk about the energy cap, Nadhim, but bear with me for 2 seconds. Are you aware of this breakthrough in vax testing using the private sector, which you speak for, as business strategy, and Imperial College? How significant a breakthrough is it potentially?
Yes, Alastair. So we've announced today further support with the team from Imperial and a company that will jointly do human challenge trials, as they're referred to, next year, where patients or volunteers, I should say, will be injected with the vaccine from Imperial, which has already gone through one set of safety round of testing, and then they will be monitored 24 hours, because they are then the reason it's called a human challenge trial is this: they are then exposed to the virus, to see how they react.
But isn't that happening in Oxford already?
That the Oxford phase 3 trials are not human challenge trials, i.e. people are not being deliberately exposed to the virus after taking the vaccine.
Okay, so that is significant. Second point, again, wearing your business and industrial strategy hat, why do you propose to shut Manchester down at midday if you can't cut a deal with Andy Burnham, when A, the cases are falling in Manchester, and B, the boss of the NHS there, Professor Jane Edison, says we're not at risk of being overwhelmed?
Well, this is a really important point, Alastair. We've been negotiating in good faith for 10 days with Andy Burnham and other local leaders, and I hope the letter last night, where we set out our position, an additional £22 million of support for Greater Manchester, as well as further support commensurate to what we've done in Liverpool City Region or in Lancashire. But if we don't make this further intervention, the current trajectory is that by first or second week of November, there will be no more ICU capacity in Greater Manchester. And I don't want to be on your programme or with Julia or anyone else back in November admitting that we made a mistake. And I think jointly with local leaders, if we do this together with the additional support we're making, and by the way, we're saying that the tier 3 intervention has a sunset clause, i.e. it only lasts for 28 days, but it's the right thing to do, Alastair, instead of what, and this is part of my issue with Andy and the other Labour leaders, is that on the one hand, they support Keir Starmer's national lockdown, which will effectively lock down a place like Cornwall, which only has 32 infections per 100,000, or Herefordshire, which has 36 infections per 100,000, yet they won't support a local intervention for Greater Manchester, or they will.
Well, they will if you throw some money at them, and the reason they won't, unless you throw money at them, and that's like Andy Burnham's got the keys to the bank in that sense, is because Professor Jane Edison, the region's medical lead for coronavirus, says there is not a problem. Intensive care capacity is not at risk of being overwhelmed. Burnham's right, you're just wasting money.
I don't agree with that, with all respect. If you look at the current trajectory, in 2 weeks' time, they will have as many infections as in March and April. And by the first to second week of November, we could run out of ICU beds. And I think that would be a risk too far to take with the lives of the people of Greater Manchester. Let's work together. Let's make this work. Let's suppress the virus so that we don't have to get to that place where we run out of ICU capacity.
But why should anybody believe? You're a guy, you're very numerate. You used to run a business that was all about numbers. Why should anybody believe these trajectories and projections? Because Professor Vallance told us, the thing was going to go rocketing skyward. It's nowhere near like that.
Well, we've seen, so if I take you back to 3 weeks ago, infection rates nationally were at 7,000 infections per day. The week later, they rose to just shy of 17,000, and now they're standing at about 19,000, 18 to 19,000.
Yeah, but peanuts compared to what Vallance and Whitty warned us of. You must admit that, Zadim.
But Alastair, part of the reason that we haven't reached that is we're making these interventions in London, in Liverpool City, in Lancashire. And what we want to do is do the same in Greater Manchester so that we continue to control the virus without having a really damaging national lockdown. You're quite right to point out I had a business career before entering politics. This is a balance of two harms, Alastair. The harm of the virus actually, taking people's lives, and if we don't suppress it, it will mean thousands of people dead, versus the harm to the economy and to livelihoods and health as well, of course, if you lose your business or your job. And so, I have no interest in wanting to exaggerate any of this. What I want to do is work with the local leaders in Greater Manchester, with Andy Burnham and others, so that we can put these measures into place, suppress the virus, so that we can come out the other end in a much healthier place. And I really have to ask people to reflect, why the inconsistency? How can you support Keir Starmer, who's suggesting a national lockdown? His front bench, Rachel Reeves, was sort of called out over the weekend. She didn't know whether it was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of national lockdown versus these localized lockdowns, which Chris Whitty quite rightly has pointed out. Through knowing much more about the virus, through test and trace, we can now forensically identify where the spikes are coming from and deal with them. That's a much better solution and much better outcome for the whole of the country and the whole economy.
All right. So I had my go on that. You've had your go on that. The final point, and you're an experienced old campaigner, Nadhim, so you will know you were booked to talk about the energy price cap, and I am determined to talk about that, albeit briefly, and I'm grateful for your answers on COVID. To me, the thing that stands out head and shoulders above everything else in your statement is the additional 4 million households with prepayment meters on default tariffs are going to come under protection for the first time. These are the poorest folk. Why have they had to wait so long?
Well, I think it's right that we looked at that again, and that we have now protected them under this cap, because it is the poorest, it is the elderly who don't shop around in the way other people have done on gas and energy. Millions of people have actually moved to much better deals. And this energy price cap for the whole of next year will mean an additional saving of £70 to £100 for 11 million households, making a huge difference. It's already, by the way, the previous energy cap has saved about £1 billion. And so it was right that we looked at it again and did even better, did even more.
Here's a suggestion, and you can either answer it now or take it away, and we'll chat about it when next I see you. Why don't Ofgem come up with a very simple computer program that when somebody reaches the age of 65 or 70, they do the search for them?
I will take that message back to Ofgem. I suspect the difficulty is the logistics of it, and the cost of it is much better to target the savings.
No, I know. It was slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I know how strongly you feel about USwitch and all of those other websites for doing it, and it really does work. But if you're an elderly person not online and what have you, it can be tricky. Nadhim, good of you to join us, and thanks very much indeed for your time. Have a great day. That's Nadhim Zahawi, the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Minister. Benedict, final quick word from you. The Minister's not for turning. They are utterly determined they will have their way in Manchester and the devil take the hindmost.
I think that was always the likely outcome, as much as Andy Burnham would have wanted to sort of get some sort of funding for Manchester. The reality of the situation is the Tories aren't losing many votes in Manchester, and they have the authority, they have the power to just tell them that this is what's happening.
But it's a weird, I can't get away from how weird it is, though, where the chairman of their backbench committee, Graham Brady, doesn't agree with them, and he's a Manchester MP. And as I quoted time and time again to Nadhim Zahawi, Professor Jane Eddleston, the region's medical lead in Manchester, says there is not a problem of being overwhelmed. Nadhim took that on board. He said, yes, we don't believe it. We still think there's a crisis. We will have our way. I mean, it's really gutsy stuff from Her Majesty's government.
I mean, if I have time to say this, I think a lot of it comes from the fear of the 10 years of the previous Tory rule and coalition rule, where there was the number constantly thrown at the government that 100,000 odd people had died because of austerity. That, I think, had a real rhetorical impact on a lot of people, especially in the Conservative Party. The thing is, COVID deaths are a lot easier to actually see in front of your face than deaths as a result of something like austerity, which we all know wasn't an accurate figure at all. The government doesn't want to be seen to be having excess deaths deaths on its hands that people can point the finger at and say you didn't act fast enough. Therefore, I think it was always likely, especially after locking down slightly slowly first time, that they are always going to jump the gun in these circumstances where possible, simply so that they can turn around and say, well, we learnt the lessons from last time and we didn't make that mistake, and excess deaths, therefore, aren't on our hands.
Well, a pretty somber note to end on. Benedict, good to talk to you. Thanks for being with us all this morning.